Hi, everybody, and you're very welcome. We're going to start the show. I'm Dave Ruane, and today we're going to talk about using the power of what already exists to do things which you may not be doing. Welcome to our show today. This can be particularly useful skill in an economic and technological environment, which is best described, I guess, as challenging, right? You've heard that word at your senior meetings, and challenging to get the right business strategy to work. We're going to have particular focus today on use cases and how you can communicate in particular with global customers, no matter where they are. As for many, they now offer a latent market yet to be harnessed. So we'll talk there. We have a superstar panel today who will provide different perspectives on ultimately the same theme. So how can you use available technologies, including the latest large language models, right? You'll hear that a number of times, and other party crashers to give you the business edge with global markets. We will have time just on logistics for Q&A at the end. So feel free to populate your questions using the tool as we go, and we will deal with them at that point towards the end of our session. We'll also have some polls, so we welcome your engagement. Actually, let's do two now, and let's get a picture of who is joining us today, so we can have our conversation a little bit more focused on what you're interested in. So first up, you should see a poll. We'd really welcome your input on that. How important is global content to your success? Is it critical, fairly important, not so much, not at all, or maybe you're unsure, that's fine. As we're letting you put your answer in there, that'd be really helpful just to understand how important it is. And let's check if we have any results. Karina, how are we looking? Great. So critical, fairly important, good to hear. You're in the right place. So let's ask you one other question. How much do you use localization, which is sometimes used term, or translation technology, language technology also used? We'll just get your thoughts on this as well. We use it a lot, fair amount, a little bit, not so much, unsure again. You have your get out of jail answer there at the end. Let's have a look at results if we have some. Thank you again for taking part in the poll. So that's interesting, folks. So we use it a lot at around 63%, a fair amount, little, not so much, very low, unsure. Everyone's fairly sure in this call. Great to hear. Really interesting to hear also that the importance of global content. So thank you very much for giving us your thoughts there. Let's move on. This is a statement which could best summarize what we'll cover today. You know, doing more with more can give you an edge, but doing more with less gives you an edge in all industries. We'll also talk about composability, right? What does that mean? Composable technology as being a key asset in technology stacks nowadays. Do you want a teaser trailer? Okay, here you go. So let's have a look at the car analogy. Let's say you have a trusted team of mechanics and they have really great garage, and you have a very fine chassis of a vehicle which works with all the systems that it needs to work with. The car drives good. But you noticed recently that performance has deteriorated compared to the norm because the norm has also changed. Maybe other cars pass you by more than before. Maybe the roads seem a bit bumpier. Question is, how can you plug in a brand new engine into your chassis and have a smooth drive? Hope you don't mind that analogy. You're probably going to see a lot about cars in this session. And today we're going to show you some tuning techniques which have real impact. Let's start though by talking about how current economics and the technological environment must impact your business strategy. We'll talk about the overall cost of software integration, opportunity cost of not automating. We'll touch on productivity enhancements and also delve into some use case studies with customer service and entry into new markets. So lots to kind of get through. Let's start our engine, shall we? Let me start with Monte. So Monte, you've led for various organizations to successfully complete builds, do turnarounds, and indeed do rebuilds of organizations with both smaller, mid-sized companies like Documentum, Initiate, and Sitecore, as well as some of the biggest names in the tech industry like Oracle, Adobe, and EMC. You're now head of go-to-market strategy and field operations at Content.ai and a board advisor for K1 Investment Management. With your broad view of technologies and in particular recently, how is the current economic backdrop and technological environment impacting business strategies? Let's start with enterprise and work back. Monte.
No, thanks, Dave. Well, first of all, I'm a car guy, so I can absolutely relate to this analogy here. I think that the key is that my experience has been that yes, economic times can be rough, but it's also a defining moment. It can be an inflection point. And I'm more of the kind that I will push the limit and ask the company, it's like, let's double down, let's capture market share. My father taught me something. I grew up in the Midwest, and he taught me that you don't make money in a good economy, you make it in a bad economy. And that's where you capture market share. That's where you maybe undermine your competition and take market away from them and such. And I think composable lends itself to that in a very unique way. Now, you use the car analogy that, yeah, the easy, obvious swap is to swap the engine, but you got to think of composable. You've got a lot of different pieces you can look at and optimize that in the best possible way. And the nice thing about composable is it's easy to put those pieces, or easier to put those pieces together and to come up with a winning package. And I think what you've got to look at is where can we capture market? Where can we exploit the opportunity? Where can we refine what we're doing and leverage some of the newer technologies that we're seeing in machine learning and such, and capture that market? And I think especially when you get in translation, that is such a vital part of the economy right now, in that you need to think globally. And I advise so many different companies on the fact that, you need to be able to act in the moment, and time to market, time to capture that momentum that you may have from an event or an opportunity. You can't wait 2, 3, 4 days like you used to be able to do. You need to act in the moment. And I think that's where a lot of these technologies and the whole notion of composables really opening doors to create new business strategies.
As I don't use technology to unmute myself, that's really interesting, Monte. We suffer from lots of use. I like what you said about, it's not just the engine. There may be other parts that you have to plug in and out of the car, or of our car, right? We're still in the analogy mode, folks. Let's talk a bit more about that integration idea. Do you have to integrate to survive nowadays? Bit of an obvious question there, Monte.
Yeah, I think we know the answer to that. But it's interesting. I've been very fortunate. I literally spent the whole day today with Forrester, reviewing some of the things that they're seeing in the marketplace and getting their guidance and giving them some input on what we're seeing. We've always talked about kind of best of breed solutions 10 years ago, but it was hard to do that. There was a lot of work to integrate in that. And now with what we're seeing in the new kind of architectures in the environment that we work in, it's much, much easier, especially when everything's API led, in many cases headless. It just gives you an opportunity to kind of plug and play in ways that maybe you couldn't have done before. So I think, when you look at the optimizing the car analogy, you got to look at the tires, you got to look at the bodywork, you got to look at the suspension and all the different things that you can tune. The interesting thing that I took away from the meetings with Forrester today is that, yes, it's easier than ever to do that, but it doesn't dispute the fact you still have to be thoughtful about the decisions you make and what are the key components that you can integrate in the best possible way. And it takes some due diligence. I think the thing we got to ask ourselves is, all right, what markets are we trying to play in? Where can we find critical success? Because the thing that I picked up from Forrester today, that yes, it's a down economy, but there are pockets in the world that are doing quite well. They mentioned that, we're seeing that the inflation rates are dropping in some of the, especially European countries, where maybe they're 15, 20%. Now they're forecasting to drop down to around 5. The economy, I think, has survived this storm far better than a lot of us thought about. And if we position ourselves now and we start coming out of this economic downturn, that could lead to explosive growth if you're well positioned. I think this is the time to start looking at how do we optimize that? How do we personalize? How do we act in the moment in 10 different languages with our marketplace to make sure that I'm hitting in the market in the moment I need with the message that resonates with my audience?
Right, because that resonance that in local markets and building up that kind of resonant experience isn't something you can do overnight. As much as you can get translated material quickly, you've got to build that up. So once the market growth happens, or the explosive growth that you mentioned comes around, you're already ready.
Yeah, and I think that's key, because I've been in this business a while, and it used to be in a marketing environment, you might spend 2 to maybe even 6 weeks on a workflow to create a message. And now it has to be done in a day or even less in some cases. And so you've got to depend on your tools and your workflows internally to be able to react in that time frame. And fortunately, AI, machine learning are all assisting a lot of that, but they're not replacing some of the work that needs to be done. The way I like to think of AI is it augments it, and it really helps optimize it versus replace some of the workflows that we may have to do today.
Let's stay with you for a second, Monte, but we often talk about the elephant in the room. I think the elephant is already in the room, right? You mentioned some of these technologies. OpenAI have pushed their tech and made it accessible, right? And grabbed headspace. Is this like the Chevrolet Vega of our generation and just won't live up to the hype? Or is it just another V8 engine that 2 years' time will go, that was just another one of those?
It's interesting because I think it's like so many of the inflection points we've had with technology. I mean, we had it with mobile. I mean, right now, if you look at, depending on which generation you're trying to hit and which market you're trying to hit, you may want to have a mobile first. You've got to start thinking about alternate devices other than a laptop screen or a console screen, but a watch. It could be a kiosk and things like that. So you've got to start thinking about all the different ways that you've got to do that. The AI is an interesting thing in that I think it's a force multiplier. I think it optimizes, but you don't want to just turn it loose. I think the thing that I took away from the Forrester meeting today is generative AI is going to help tremendously, but it's still not going to replace the fact that someone's got to check the content. Someone's still got to make sure that it's localized in the right way. It will expedite things, but it won't replace things, if that makes sense.
Right. And are we potentially going to have a situation where people are going to say, was this content created with OpenAI, right? So the whole liability side of things, right? We're not going down that rabbit hole, but we did see some interesting new definition of speed, right? Monte, you found us this. We thought it was a bit of fun, folks. So is the new definition of speed being people becoming experts in AI recently? Yeah. We'll leave that with you.
Well, AI certainly makes it easier, doesn't it?
There you go. So speaking of speed, we have another poll for you, so you can get involved. So we'll just launch that there. How much is time to market, right? Speed affecting your business? Do you think your competition is ahead of you in those spaces? So you've a couple of options. Yes, this is the key business objective for us, time to market. We own it. We're leading in our space, or maybe not. Maybe it's important. We sometimes have to play a bit of catch up there, though. Not so important for us and unsure. Bit of an obvious question, maybe, but again, let's get your thoughts and get you involved here. We'll show those results once you've had a chance to click your choice. We're going to pivot the conversation after this. So I'll give you the teaser, right? We're going to talk about large language models, LLMs, which sometimes is hard to pronounce. But before we do, okay, that's great. So there is a sense of, time to market is still that difficult to achieve sometimes. It's not always been the leadership position. So Monte, any thoughts on that?
I think it depends on the marketplace. The question I always ask companies is, what happens if your competitor's first to market with that message? Does it make a difference to you, or does that actually hurt you? I don't think you can be sloppy about it and just throw things out there that won't stick, but I think you have to be aggressive. I had one client that she told me, it's like, Monte, I used to have 2-3 weeks to be able to create this content and get it to market. Now I have to do it in one day in 19 different languages. And if I don't, my competition will beat me to the marketplace. So I think, if anything, the times are continuing to compress, and the evidence proves that. And it's going to get more and more aggressive as time goes, to the point where you're almost responding in the moment.
It's interesting you say that. I was speaking at a conference in Berlin earlier this year in the e-commerce sector, and I was speaking with an expert from a company who have been able to tap the latent market for particular luxury goods in particular through their e-commerce web offerings. And they found that actually first mover was key there, that you get first mover, but then you build the experience. And to your point earlier, you try and have people enjoying the experience, then move them to mobile. And if you do that, that's almost like a green tick against comfort with the platform and comfort with buying, what are expensive line items over your mobile device. That's interesting. Well, we're going to pivot on a little bit. Thank you, Monte, very much for those insights. And JP, look, as CIO at SYSTRAN, you lead the US organization there, which is the original pioneering machine translation company. Can you walk us into how LLMs, right, I said it earlier, large language models, fits into the OpenAI piece? Why should everyone be sitting up now? What does that actually mean to the global content economy? JP.
Yeah, thank you, Dave and Monte, for all that great discussion there. Absolutely, machine translation is really one of the earliest forms of generative AI, if you will, right? So we're generating new content, translating a source into another language, and obviously AI has become de facto buzz term, as you said. I like the speed of everyone becoming experts. I think one thing we need to remember, though, is that these aren't artificially intelligent systems. They're systems that have been trained on massive amounts of human-generated content, right? So there was human-generated content that was used to train these models. The thing that's really changed is that the larger these models have become, and we've been doing language models since the 1950s, really, when the inception of attempts to do machine translation. The latest generation, what they've done is they've really expanded the scope because of computational power, because of capacity, because of the amount of time spent to create them. So what does it mean in the global content economy is really a whole lot more content that is going to be generated, a whole lot more content that needs to be edited, evaluated, reviewed. You certainly want to be sure that there are guardrails created around this new generation of generative AI tools, because there's a lot of also legal implications, right? As I mentioned, they've been trained on massive amounts of human-generated content. Well, what are the data rights ownership of that content that was used to create it? So there's a lot of legal implications that business needs to figure out. But then there's also the fact that you can't allow a system really to hallucinate in a real business. So you can't just let it go loose, because you want to be sure that the content is fitting your voice, your style, and the message that you're trying to get across. I think there's a lot of great technology that's coming from it, though, and it's really about, again, augmenting our capacity as humans to be more productive, to do better business, to do business globally. I
like that, augmenting our capacity to do that. Another car pick for you all, folks. Thanks, JP. And Andy, let's get you in here. You're one of the foremost thought leaders in the localization language technology space, having built some of the open standards used in the industry with over 30 years experience. And you were the architect of XTM Cloud, right? The original cloud solution here, which is a multi-tenancy SaaS-based translation management system. And your CIO there. Is Chat, GPT, OpenAI, these forms, are they ahead of their time, behind, or just on the money? With our friend from GM there beside us. Andy.
Okay, many thanks, Dave. I would actually say that OpenAI are more like Tesla. Actually, it's no surprise that Elon Musk was an early investor in the system. As JP pointed out excellently, these large language models have actually come about only because we've had access to such a large amount of data, and that the computing power has actually caught up. They are quite incredible. Just as Tesla really shook up the automotive field by taking advantage of the performance increases with lithium batteries, which the EV1 didn't have. Actually, if the EV1 had been released about 15 years later, it would have been just spot on. The thing that got the EV1 was basically that the battery technology wasn't there yet. Now it's actually caught up, and the thing with large language models is that they have caught up. And the surprising thing to me, taking this 30,000 feet view, 95% of what has gone into OpenAI, into GPT-3, 3.5, into ChatGPT, GPT-4, has actually come out of Google mainly. And the secret sauce of OpenAI is, number one, hiring an awful lot of Google AI engineers, which they did really, really well at the beginning. And the other thing is a business model. OpenAI, even 6 months ago, were only 250 people. Google is like 100,000, and it's an elephant. It's more like oil tanker. It can't change direction very quickly, whereas OpenAI are like a yacht. They can actually turn on a dime, and they've actually taken that's 95% of what Google had, and the real secret sauce, apart from hiring the engineers, was just making it available freely to the public, which is something Google still are playing awful catch up with. So yeah, it's OpenAI much more like Tesla, disrupting the industry, taking standard components and putting them together in a different order, taking advantage of the latest technology. In the case of OpenAI and large language models, it is the seminal paper that was published by Google in 2015, which is attention is all you need. And all these systems, in essence, what they're doing is just predicting the next word. It sounds simple, but it is incredible what they're doing. Just
So,
coming
Andy,
back. Yep.
Yeah, have Google put a knife somewhere they shouldn't? You know, it sounds like there's a Kodak moment going on here for anyone who remembers Kodak cameras, folks, and their ownership of the film business way back. Andy?
Absolutely. It's a problem when you grow into a large corporation. You're not
have to keep an eye around for disruption.
It's just very difficult for you to kind of turn on the dime. Yep.
Excellent. Thank you, Andy. Let's talk about, here's someone with their watch, right? Managing their car security from their smart tech watch. There are new kind of partnerships. We probably didn't envisage technological partnerships many years ago. So are strong partnership ecosystems one of the most important things currently for enterprises to consider when choosing their own tech partners? Monte, thoughts on that one?
Yeah, no, I think it's incredibly important. I think where a lot of companies are struggling right now, I literally talk to them every week, is that they've built these huge systems that are very complex. And now that the market is making this turn and adopting some of these new capabilities, it's very difficult for them to do that. And so that's why composable is such an important part, and having the ability in a modular way to plug and play to create the most effective solution for your business problem. And I think that's where Mock Alliance and those composable standards make such a big deal. The other thing I wanted to kind of come back to a little bit, and we were talking about AI. I had the good fortune of listening to TED Talks, and I encourage you to listen. It's recorded out there, of the guest Gary Kasparov talk, and he was talking about AI. He was the first person to lose to a computer playing chess. He's the great chess master. He says he doesn't fear AI. He says, I want to embrace it, because he says they will never have passion. They'll never have intuition. They'll never have the notion of intent. They, as we said, they're language processors, or they're processing things that humans have taught them and they've learned. And so I think that's where we have to really position this and not let the hype cycle kind of take us off in other directions. Now, maybe someday they will get to the point where they appear to have intuition and things like that, but it's all going to be based off of human input. And that's why I say we need to be cautious on expecting too much too soon, because you may get a result you don't like. And, I think, the way that machine learning is deployed, it's taking something that has been supplied to it, maybe translating it. And if you have your partner ecosystem set up correctly, it's easy to then exploit that across your workflow. But you don't want to just let the system do it completely without check, because you may publish something that you didn't intend to publish. You have some problems that could even go so far as create legal issues. So it's important to always make sure we've got that in check. Now, as I know the SYSTRAN does this, I know XTM Cloud does this, because we work with you guys, is that you're able to take the content and transition it across different languages in a very expedient manner. I think you would probably be nervous too if we said, hey, no humans ever checked this. Here, guys, go translate this. And so you really want to make sure that we're keeping checks and balances in the system and not letting it run amok. So.
It's funny you mentioned that. I was talking to someone in the whole NLP space a year or so ago, and they were talking about, some of the expertise that they really need comes from the translation industry, right? That understanding that you have to have checks and balances, understanding how AI can be used in the process in a hybrid way. And it's been that way for a number of years. Let's just ask JP to join in here. So JP, on partnerships, just real quick, we mentioned the mechanics earlier. Will they just figure out the business solution?
Well, you need trusted partners for implementation, right? So technology doesn't create a solution in and of itself, right? So you need to understand how to apply the technology in applications of real solutions to real business problems. And so Monte mentioned a few things where, you know, in the localization or translation workflow, you've got, you know, a number of steps that can be smartly automated with good guardrails and good checkpoints. And so you're confident in the result it's going to be for that particular business problem that you have of, let's get this content in another language as quickly as possible. So these technologies are really great. They're going to keep advancing our capability and augmenting our productivity. So we'll be more productive, we'll be faster, et cetera. But we do need to make sure that the trusted partners understand those pieces, that understand I'm trying to find a solution to a business problem and not just trying to play with fancy new technology.
Excellent. Thank you, JP. And let's switch gears just real quick and talk about the cost of software integration versus opportunity cost of not automating. So JP, staying with you on this, how do you see this?
Yeah, so I think Monte started alluding to this. One of the really wonderful things is that these software, I believe the software integration costs have decreased quite a bit in these last few years because things have become more component-based. They've become more modularized. You can stack technologies much more easily together. And really solution providers, real solution providers like ourselves, like XTM, that have off-the-shelf integrations available so that you can piece things together without, you know, spending all of the time and effort to recreate integrations, but also that there's a maintenance, there's support, and there's know-how, there's expertise there. So these decrease in time to deploy is really important because, again, what we're trying to be is either, you know, increase our time to market, be faster, be first, or, you know, what is that opportunity cost if you're not the first in a new global market? It may make all the difference, right? So being a first mover and early mover, but as Monte said earlier, in a sustainable way, in a thoughtful way. So you're not just, you know, slapping something together and putting it in a new market, but seeing that, okay, these components have been built by these trusted partners. I can put them together into a real solution workflow and get my content into new market or be able to serve clients in new markets more quickly. So I think that's really where you have to look at, you know, what is the opportunity cost of not automating? It could be pretty high if you're, you know, looking to grow globally.
Interesting. And Andy, when you sat down and built the architecture for XTM Cloud, I know one of the things you had in the DNA there was the need to have open connectivity. How do you see that, you know, looking back in the rear view mirror and then now that you're kind of what you thought would happen did happen? How do you see things now?
It was spot on, Dave. What I foresaw is the need for connectivity. The advent of XML and then web services, which came to the fore around the turn of the century, were a real game changer. It really allowed us to tightly integrate with other systems. I think XTM was probably integrates with about 40 different systems, or has the capacity to do so, including SYSTRAN, where we have a connector to use SYSTRAN's empty capabilities. So it's been, for someone who has been in IT for 47 years and started up on mainframes that weren't connected to anything, it's a combination of a dream that we were always chasing. It's fantastic to see. Fantastic to see also what we're doing with effectively a generation of computing architecture that's been around for 75 years, the von Neumann architecture. I thought it wasn't possible, but certainly the large language models have blown me away, really. And it takes a lot to get me that excited about something after so many years. So no, connectivity is brilliant. The advances in IT are fantastic. The advances in our understanding of language. And certainly these large language models are intelligent. You can argue that all they're doing is predicting the next word. It meets all the standard criteria of intelligence, which is recognizing patterns, remembering the patterns, and then using the patterns to predict the future. So yeah, we have the advent of intelligent systems. They may not have agency, but they are certainly intelligent.
Thank you, Andy.
And the thing to remember is we're only at the beginning.
It's only just begun, as the Carpenters
really,
once sang.
it is true. The advent of large language models, attention is all you need. That paper by Google, which basically blew apart the limitations that we had on language training. And these things just don't do language, they also do code. You know, you can convert Python to JavaScript to Java to C++. They are almost limitless in their capacity.
It worries me, but I had a teenage daughter say to me that she did a synopsis of a book using ChatGPT. I didn't know whether to be proud or to scold, so I'm still on the fence on that one.
No, be proud. It's using technology. We're tool users. In the end, what differentiates Homo sapiens is that we are tool users, and it's just another tool, and we'll be silly not to use it. Yep.
Thank you, Andy. Let's talk about use cases, right? So applications of what we're talking about. So, you know, JP, you've seen many use cases, right? You're sort of leading edge on some of the kind of in the moment get content to an audience that understands it. You know, tell us a bit about what you're seeing.
Yeah, there's a number of problems that businesses try to solve when they're going global or serving global markets. First, certainly faster turnaround time in the localization process is a big thing, right? Where automation within a process in your whole localization process workflow, like with XTM, really matters a lot. And this could be time to market requirements, getting there first, or just actually, updating to be as quickly as possible. But there's also use cases where you're not putting a full localization workflow together, but you need to serve, let's say, clients in a foreign language in real time with real-time chat and real-time support. Because it's not just about going into a market, but it's also then about serving the client afterwards. So yeah, there's industries, there's just industry examples across the board where really putting that integration into place has really been a real benefit. There's e-commerce examples. You alluded to an e-commerce example earlier, but we have customers such as Farfetch and Zazzle that are using it to really accelerate their translation and localization processes and put content into foreign languages immediately to be able to sell across languages. Then you've got things like software and technology providers such as Adobe and Cisco and those types of the world that need to update their documentation frequently. Things change at a really fast pace.
You shared with us a kind of an interesting iceberg map, I'll call it, which looks at some of the different layers. And I've been in this industry over 25 years, and certainly that wasn't the case 15, 10, 20 years ago. Definitely not, right? Talk us through some of these layers. You've touched on some of them already.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the traditional, as you said, localization might have been full process, full human enabled, so to speak. So where you've got an expert that's going to, at each step, check the content, quality assurance, et cetera, without any human touch possibly. And that was a traditional use case. It's really become, and it's evolved now with the advance of these language models, that you can absolutely do a lot of the heavy lifting with the language model and then put the experts in the loop. And the experts in the loop are either going to edit the content or do quality assurance, because again, these large language models, they're wonderful at doing things that sound super fluent, might be inaccurate, right? So you need some quality assurance in that space. Customer service, it's real time. It has to happen right away. You don't have time, to go through a time or the money to go through a human translation or human process for customer service. The same goes for monitoring of events. And let's say at the bottom there, secure collaboration compliance, where you've got massive amounts of data. You're not going to necessarily go through any kind of human enabled process for that amount of data. You really need to, find the nuggets of information in that data and then have those experts review those key nuggets of information. So there's a lot of things, as well as sensitive. Maybe you don't want to put human eyeballs on some content, or because the information is really time sensitive. Let's say you're international, your business people are working on a deal internationally. They're in another country. They need to securely translate content just to see, doing their due diligence. And you're not going to put that through a human translation process and lose time. So there's a number of use cases.
Yeah, and just to add to that, there's now anonymization technology, right, for that purpose too, where if you do have to get eyes on it, that some data is anonymized given its level of sensitivity. But I think what we're hearing here is that companies have started to understand that each content type requires a different procedural approach, right? And many of those can fit into AI, neural machine translation workflows, which previously people didn't think they could put that content through. But now there's an opportunity there to do a kind of a content audit, right? Look at all your content types. And I've seen companies who have, over 150, within the business units they know of. And they could all have a different workflow potentially. Andy, any thoughts on this kind of mapping and layering of approaches to different content?
Very, very interesting question, Dave. Basically, we can disregard a great deal of what we've seen in terms of the accuracy, as JP mentioned, in terms of the LLMs. So if you ask an LLM like ChatGPT or GPT-3-4 a question, you can actually set, there's a slider which says temperature. So if you move the temperature along, you can get it to what is known as hallucinate more or less. If you set the temperature to 0, it'll try and be accurate, but it has been trained on the internet. And as we know, everybody and anyone can publish stuff on the internet. I certainly don't trust anything or most things on the internet. Because anybody can publish anything. So the amazing thing for me is not to rely on anything from the current crop of large language models in terms of factual answers, but it's from the linguistic side, and that is incredible. I look at the large language models as fantastic tools for NLP type tasks. So the fact that they've taught themselves to translate between 150 odd languages is amazing. With GPT-3, I can talk to it in Polish, I can talk to it in French, I can talk to it in English. It understands over 150 languages fluently. So all questions it will answer back in the language that you've requested. But you can also do things like, how do you assess the translation of this sentence? To me, that's incredible. Or given a translation of a sentence that's in male voice, give me a rendition of this as a female voice. That really blew me away. No tool, no language tool we have at the moment is capable of anything close to that. Or if I give it an email and tell me all of the personal identifiable data in that email or Word document, it will identify all those bits so I can anonymize those. It can also, on an individual word or phrase level, tell me in a translation what is the equivalent in that language to the source language phrase or word. These things are fantastic, and they enable us to increase the quality assurance in XTM, to do anonymization, to do even better bilingual terminology extraction that we do already.
Plugging the engine back into the chassis, as we were saying earlier.
That's it. It is fantastic. Just don't rely on it for factual answers. But for linguistic tasks, wow, it is mind-blowing.
Thank you, Andy. One particular technology overlap, that we've seen, we worked on jointly between SYSTRAN and XTM is where you already have assets that you can redeploy. So Andy, JP, do you want to jump in here and just explain what's going on with this particular AI enhanced TM or neural augmented technology?
What we did here is we taught the neural machine translation engine how to take suggestions from all of the content you had previously translated. So traditionally, in the localization space, you have this sort of static database of pre-translated content. And that database, which we call the translation memory, you had a high bar for what you would use from that before sending it to a human to be translated fully or to machine translation for translation. What we were able to do with the AI enhanced version of our neural machine translation engine is then take all the suggestions above, let's say 50% match, and send those to the engine in real time and have the engine adapt its translation in real time based on those inputs. It improves the utility of your pre-existing translations. And as you can see here, we have a use case from one of our mutual customers, Ariel Corp, that was able to reduce their human translation in projects by 31% in the first year of using this, and actually saw a significant boost in the quality, the measured quality of their MT output by using this technology. Again, really going back to what Andy said, this tooling that we've learned from the latest generation of large language models has shown us that, that you can use this context, these suggestions, to improve the translation. And really, we're looking at these evolutionary steps of the technology by, these things that we've learned. And as you can see here, this is a workflow, in terms of reducing their human translation, kind of the things that they did and minimizing their localization spend, but also improving their productivity, right? So they could do more content with the same amount of resources because the system is producing better. They can go into additional languages for the same, localization spend because they're leveraging their technology stack in a better way. So I think they increased their machine translation usage by 129% from the start of using XTM and SYSTRAN through last year. And then that will just continue to improve.
What I think about this functionality, I sometimes call it the Airbnb functionality, because it's, an asset that people had already that they weren't using. Mm-hmm. So there's probably folks listening in today or on the recording, which will have assets that this technology could help them use and save cost immediately, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the standards in the localization industry is to use something like 75 or 85% or greater matches, for those pre-existing translations. Well, here, you can take everything, there's significant progress taking anything above 50%, for example, but you could literally take all of it and give it to the system and have it adapt its translation. So as you said, using an asset that you haven't been taking advantage of.
So we want to show this use case as an example of the kind of smart technology and the connectivity through a partnership, which is enabling business capability and business improvement and direct gains. Andy, any thoughts before we move to wrap?
I think from our point of view, from XTM Cloud, we're in an ideal situation because XTM is the kind of hub for the wheel. We do all of the heavy lifting in terms of the workflows, extracting the text from its original electronic form, processing it automatically through machine translation or human translation, and then putting it back seamlessly into the target version of the document, be it Word, HTML, DITA, XML, whatever. So for us, these large language models are just another tool to complement the offerings that we have in XTM. We value our partners very much, and we've had a long, very fruitful relationship with SYSTRAN in terms of SYSTRAN is the default machine translation system for XTM when you sign up for an XTM account, and it's one of the best on the market. Whatever happens, we're in a good place to help customers go to market early.
Yeah, remember the garage with the mechanics and the chassis, folks, right? It's that guidance needed when you're looking at this new world of tech. So, hey, quick summary.
We are the garage, Dave.
We're still working on who we are in the analogy, but you think
no, we are the garage.
We're the garage.
People come to us with their car, and we put in the engine that you want and deliver the final vehicle.
So, folks, please put your favorite car engines in chat here and any questions, JP.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, David, I'd say stay tuned. There's we're looking at those real business solutions by utilizing the technology that's come out of these latest generation of large models, and we're putting them into real ways to use it as a solution in our upcoming releases. And so I say stay tuned, from SYSTRAN and XTM, be very business-centered solutions utilizing this technology to improve what you need to do for business.
Yeah, brilliant. And we'll do final words in a minute for everybody. And just two more polls for you here. And thank you for hanging on. We're almost there. So first one is, if you are interested in hearing more or like to see how translation management systems such as XTM Cloud could help you grow and expand globally, yes, let's talk. No, maybe later, keep me updated. I'm already using it. I'm already using another system. I'm fine. Be great if you could help us out, and then we'll ask you one more question before we take final words. So we'll close that when we have some of your answers. Thank you. We also have a couple of questions coming in, so we'll take those in 2 minutes. And then the next one will be about neural machine translation engines. Similar, so SYSTRAN is a neural machine translation engine and platform. Is that something you're interested in? Please, again, give us your thoughts. We won't be burdening you with lots of useless information. In fact, one of our approaches, which hopefully you've picked up here, is to share thought leadership information that's valuable. Hopefully you got some of that today. Okay, great. We can close that. And let's get your final thoughts. Have you seen some expansion activities? Where to next? Andy, I happened to be near you last week in London at XTM Live when you did a really great keynote, actually, and showed how the LLM space is already competitive, but maybe people haven't heard of the other ones. Can you predict what is next? Let's start with you, Andy.
Well, Google have belatedly released Bard, which is the kind of first open access competitor to OpenAI. Specifically to ChatGPT, which is good, but it's still lagging quite a bit behind. It only understands English. They're kind of dropping new features in gradually, drip, drip, week after week. So they're trying to catch up. Google have so much potential because not only the standard large language model division of Google that produce things like Palm, which I don't know if you remember, there was this big hullabaloo about whether Palm was sentient. There was a Google engineer that claimed that Palm was fully sentient. And there's a great YouTube video about that. But also they have DeepMind, which is another subsidiary of theirs, which is producing amazing things towards artificial general intelligence. So Google have so much potential. Whether they can actually get their act together fast enough remains to be seen, because OpenAI are just powering ahead at the moment. Facebook have kind of produced some really nice models like Llama, which is very famous now in the AI space, but they kind of stopped there. This was about a year ago, and Microsoft have gone all in with OpenAI, investing an additional over and above their initial $1 billion investment. They're actually investing $10 million now, $1 billion in OpenAI. So OpenAI is still out there, out in front, way out in front still.
Excellent, thanks, Andy. I'll come back to Microsoft in a second. Actually, JP, your final thoughts?
Yeah, I'd say I think the one big takeaway I want people to have from this is that data is gold, and your data is gold. And I know we've used this term before, but these language models, these large language models, wouldn't exist without our data, without the human data they were trained on. And when you think about your own business, you've got lots of data within your business, proprietary data that can help you be the first mover, be the best in the new market. And taking advantage of that data gives you a competitive advantage. And so really working with trusted partners to see how can you take out additional value from the data you already have in your business. I think that's the big thing. As these language models, evolve and transition, there's still going to be a lot of room for fine tuning, and your data, your own data, is going to be used for that fine tuning.
Thank you, JP. Monte, final thoughts?
So I'm just going to leave maybe on a little more of a fun final note here, and piggybacking off what Andy said. Next time you're at a dinner conversation with friends over a bottle of wine, imagine the scenario, you go to turn off your computer at the end of the day and it says, please don't turn me off, I'm aware. What would you do? It's good dinner conversation.
Digital
Yeah.
wine,
Good point,
digital wine.
Monte.
I'd buy another bottle of that wine, I think, for the sounds of it, right? Brilliant, thank you. Let's go to some questions. I don't see any questions. If you have any, we'll give you a minute just to enter those in. I do see a comment or two. I mentioned Microsoft. We have someone who said, if we haven't already, should we be buying stocks in Microsoft? Good question. Anyone on that?
Always have, always will.
Well done. Yeah, used to have some myself. And then someone else has wrote in about our engines and said slant 6 for the win. I believe that's a famous Chrysler engine, just for anyone who's not in the know.
Ah, slant 6. Yes, I remember.
Thank you, Craig. Good comment. Looks like we don't have any other questions, so we'll wrap right now in 10 seconds and just say, you know, we're running various events and webinars over the next months, both companies. We'll get you the information on our events pages so that you can keep track of that, and you'll see more on these topics, composable and others. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you to our panelists. So Monte, JP, Andy, great chatting with you, and thank you very much for insights.
Thank
Thanks all.
you.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.